Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Women in Math and STEM, where our mission is to reach out to as many professionals, aspiring professionals, students, whatever you name it. We try to reach out to them, who essentially support the initiative of bringing more women and young girls into the STEM field. So, with that being said, as always, feel free to open up the description or transcript to better follow along, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello, and thank you so much for being able to make it to this episode today and talk with me. Just to sort of start off, do you mind briefly introducing yourself as well as talking and walking us through your STEM journey, but particularly like why AI and computer science?
Sure. My name is Charlotte Dungan. I'm the Chief Learning Officer at the Mark Cuban Foundation. We do AI boot camps for high school students out of school, typically in a corporate office where students not only learn about how to implement artificial intelligence, but have the experience of being in a workplace and being mentored by those adults that are in that workspace. So my STEM journey is long and winding. I think it probably started with my love of museums as a child and going to the science museum and also just tinkering with things at home. And coming out of school, really the most important thing I did, I went to school, but financially it was really a challenge for me. I had a very precarious a scholarship and a challenging family situation, very little money. And because I was working two jobs alongside going to school, I actually lost my scholarship by missing one too many classes in English. So even though I had a B, I lost my scholarship. And so really the most important thing I did was I kept building projects outside of school and I kept going back to college. So it wasn't like a failure was the end for me. I did end up working in tech. I was a computer programmer for 10 years, and I built those skills with individual college classes as well as truly just building projects and learning the latest technologies and finding the smallest way for me to implement that, whether it was like a little project that I do for free as part of my portfolio. I also worked in a paper factory and I worked at a pizza shop. And so while I was doing these projects and building my skill set, technically, I was also keeping myself afloat. And that was a fine way to learn how to do the work that I did. And so I took a winding path as a programmer, and then I became an educator later. Once I had kids, I looked around at the schools and I was like, I don't want to send my kids to any of these. Why? So I went and got an education degree. And then I built a learning center of my own for a while. And so I would say my path is like very zigzaggy. And what I would say to your listeners is like, that's how most people's careers are. Your path might look very different than mine, but it's okay to not like march up a ladder. And it's a lot more fun to do parkour.
I see. I think that's such an inspirational mindset. And also I was curious about like you've done so many different projects, you've had so many different experiences. How did exactly like all of these like I guess like different parkour like strategies sort of shaped like your perspective on life or like your attitude or also like your approach to like STEM and STEM education?
Yeah, the first thing is that the opportunities come bit by bit. And so saying yes is one of the best things you can do and not taking yourself out of the running for something. So I see a lot of young women in particular looking at like, oh, I don't have every skill or I don't know that yet, so I'm not going to try or I'm not going to do it. A lot of times the opportunity comes because you said, well, I'm going to try, I'm going to apply, I'm going to see what happens. Um, Even if you don't get it, if you apply to 10 things, maybe you're going to get four of them. And those opportunities of saying yes or trying something and not being afraid of the rejection. My rule is always, I'm going to put my name on the list and let someone else tell me no, rather than choosing no by not putting my name out there.
I see. And then also as like a current STEM educator, what do you think are sort of like the biggest challenges facing STEM education today?
By far the biggest challenge in STEM education as a whole is that the industry is evolving so quickly that it's difficult to be able to react to those changing circumstances. And I'll give you an example. I was teaching artificial intelligence at the North Carolina School of Science and Math long ago in 2019. And this was before generative AI. Like it just wasn't a thing. OpenAI hadn't happened. And so everything that I taught in that course, which ended up being part of the North Carolina course that they taught at the state level, is pretty outdated. Like we didn't put Gen AI in our AI course. So that's really interesting. A typical revision cycle for a curricula that you might use in a school takes at least 2 years. So, for example, any AP that you take from the College Board, a teacher has to be trained on that curriculum. They have to like have the test. So if they make a revision, it actually takes 2 years for an AP course to update, because they have to give teachers time to learn what changes are being made, that they have to prepare students for the exam. So the quickest you can update an AP exam is 2 years. And if you think about 2 years with data science and AI and even what we're doing in the science fields with the latest things with protein folding, and like that completely upended what was possible in science. Used to have a PhD and you would study for 7 years and figure out 3 proteins, and now an AI can fold all of them, billions of them. And AlphaFold, really, they won the Nobel Prize for good reason, because it sped up how quickly we can do drug discovery. It's really amazing. But to prepare students, it's not so much about the curriculum as it is about you being proactive and continuing to learn and having a curious mindset to be able to keep up with the pace of technology. It doesn't mean you need to know everything, but it does mean that you don't wait for a teacher to tell you what you need to know. You go find the information that you're passionate about and be as involved as possible in that thing.
That makes a lot of sense. And also, I guess, speaking or like on the topic of artificial intelligence, like why is it so important for sort of K to 12 students to learn about artificial intelligence, and sort of what are like the most important things when it comes to like learning about a field that's continuously evolving?
Yep, I think the first thing to know is that even if you're a kindergartner, you are interacting with this technology. Your parents don't have to give you a phone or a tablet for you to be walking into a grocery store, and the grocery store is aware, if you're at a big box store, it's aware of who's shopping and what types of things they're buying based on the trends of the things they put in their cart. And you'll even get like custom coupons. And so kids are experiencing AI very young. YouTube is curating an algorithm for what shows they might like to watch. And so the data that's being produced with AI does affect students very early on. Some of that could be your state exam or your testing framework for school, or who's getting placed into certain courses, for better or for worse. And it really depends locally where you are, where those things are happening. Some states aren't employing as many of those things as others, but everything around us is being driven by an AI-enabled world. And so it's really important to understand where data comes from and how it's being used in our society, whether or not you choose to go into a STEM career. And then AI is also being used in all kinds of different workplaces. Like the insurance industry decides how much you pay for car insurance or renter's insurance. And that has to do with the places that you are. It used to be a little bit more like your zip code, but now we can be even more granular about who specifically is more at risk or less at risk and what they pay.
Oh, I see. And then also on the topic of AI, like what, or out of all like the AI innovations or advancements, what do you find particularly exciting?
I love, I'm gonna go ahead and say my Google Pixel phone, because the camera features are truly amazing. I take like really great photos just because the algorithm helps me. And it might not be obvious that that's AI. That's another one of those uses that's like embedded. But if you used to have an old photo camera or something, and you look at your parents' photo albums, their pictures are kind of trash. Like they're kind of grainy, out of focus. They're like blurry. If it's dark, you probably just saw the sparkler. And our phones now can adjust the lighting in dark situations. They can take out background noise, or let's say you have something in your background and you don't want anybody to see it. I'm using a technology right now that puts a background here, but it's doing it on the fly. It can take a burst of photos and get everybody's eyes open in a group photo where nobody's eyes are closed. Now I just went to a park with my husband and we took a picture sitting on a bench together, but it was just the two of us. So he sat down and took a picture, and then I sat down next in there and he could like adjust it. And we took a picture. We were there together, but we didn't have a third person to take a photo of us. So we made one with AI. And that just brings me so much joy, like on a daily basis. And then when I want to, I can search those photos and I can do it with AI. I can describe what I'm looking for, like the name of a unicorn birthday party, and it'll bring me up those photos because it knows what those words mean and can respond to me. So I think what's most exciting to me is not like I don't know, the inside, the guts, but more like the positive ways that people's lives are benefiting from AI technologies. It's certainly always both positive and negative.
I see, that's really neat. And I guess sort of to jump around, sort of to shift gears a little bit, I was just wondering, how exactly do you encourage students who may be like intimidated or discouraged from learning about AI and computer science to sort of get out there and sort of like dive headfirst into learning about these subjects?
Yeah, I think everybody should take an intro computer science course, just like I think every student should have the opportunity to take science, math, history. It's just part of being in our world. And if you're not learning formally about technology, then you don't get the full education that you should. Many states are now mandating computer science education because of the influence of technology. And those courses are designed for students without prior knowledge. So there's a really famous book called Program or Be Programmed. And the idea there is that by having knowledge, you can understand the impacts of technology for yourself. It's not about a career or a job. It's about like how you work in the world and how you can keep yourself safe and how you can benefit from technology and have, instead of being part of the product, being programmed. Like, you know that they're taking your data, you talk about your favorite style of shoe, and then it shows up in your ad feed, right? Like, where else is that data going? There's something called surveillance capitalism, and it's the idea that these companies, like when you play Pokemon Go, if you're letting it track your location all the time, they're not doing that for the game. You're not playing for free. What are they doing with where you are all the time? And so I think what's exciting to me about AI education or computer science education is just that every student deserves the opportunity to understand how technology is influencing them. And that could be for your career, even if you're not a programmer, if you go into finance or if you go into health. If you're in healthcare, it's really important to understand computers, that they're being used in that field all the time. Even things that you might not expect, like zoology. I've done a project with the North Carolina Zoo and how we use technology to help people conserve spaces that they care about. So think broadly about computer science, not as like, I'm not going to be a programmer, so I don't want that, but more like, I deserve to know how the things I use every single day impact me.
I've never thought about it that way, and I think it's a really good perspective to take. And also, I've noticed that you've had a lot of experiences, but one of them was being an MIT AI teaching systems fellow. And I was just wondering how that experience might have influenced or shaped your perspective on like being in education or being a leader in AI.
Yeah, that's one of those times where I said yes, and tried to apply, and I certainly was far out of my depth. These are like incredibly bright PhD education researchers in technology, and I was literally a high school teacher in North Carolina, and I thought, well, the only thing they can say is no. And so I applied, and they accepted me, which was super cool. And so I went to MIT, and the Teaching Systems Lab looks at how technology, AI, can be used to help teachers be better educators. So doctors and social workers, they get a lot of practice before they go into their clinical work. So social worker basically has to work for a year and teach, and doctors have a year where they do a lot of practice scenarios of how to deal with a patient or a client. And teachers really just get like a little bit of student teaching, which is mostly actual teaching. There's not a lot of practice. And so the idea of this teaching systems lab was, could we help teachers hear themselves and hear how other teachers navigate difficult conversations in the classroom to improve their practice? And, and so these are safe practice spaces for educators. So, for example, these were specifically for computer science teachers. So, if you have an elementary school student and they need additional support with reading, for example, it's very common that you pull the student out of their elective, their gym class or their digital class, in order to give them that additional support in reading. But the problem with that is it's often at the expense of learning computer science or learning art or something that they're passionate about. And so the teacher may have a role in advocating for that student to do something that they enjoy that keeps their love of school alive. What they may not need is more reading time at that moment. They might actually need to find that there's a place where they fit in school. And they deserve the same learning opportunity as a student who isn't struggling with reading. And so the thing that I was helping to build was a conversational agent that would help students practice how to advocate to their administration about how to keep that student in their elective to learn computer science. Like, what might you say to your principal or to the parent to help them understand why and how you might navigate also getting that reading support? Like, we're not throwing out reading, we're just, so there are all kinds of difficult conversations that teachers have. This was a practice space, and I was one of the educators that was helping to design, with researchers, this sort of conversational agent. And from that, I got to write a research paper, which was, I've done some of that in grad school, but it was certainly at a very different level, a very high level. And there's no shame in not being the expert in the room because I did bring some value to that. We often at my job work with students like you, high school students, and your perspective is valuable because you're a high school student. I don't need you to be anyone else except a high school student to bring value to that. So understand that sometimes the things we think of as weaknesses are actually strengths. And that's why I was accepted to the program and ultimately why I got to write a research paper.
It sounds amazing. And then sort of continuing on like the topic of education, I was just wondering, what are some like particularly memorable moments or meaningful experiences you've had while teaching?
Oh, it's always the students. They are just amazing. They always give me hope. Just seeing a student do something that they've never thought they could before. One of my students just wrote to me on LinkedIn actually, and he went to Prague for his like summer abroad or something. And he just said, thank you. I would have never got to do this if I hadn't taken computer science. And you'd never think like Prague. Uh, but he ended up working at an internship at a company there, learning about computers. And and that was really cool. But it's always the students. They're so interesting and engaging and all different. And like your difference is okay. Like you don't need to be the same as anyone else. You can just be you, and that turns into something great.
I see. And then sort of, I guess, since we're nearing towards the end, I was just wondering, like, do you have any recommendations for resources that students could use when it comes to like learning about AI or learning about computer science?
Oh, Well, the first thing I'd say is like continue to learn. Don't ever stop. It's not like one resource. We partner with Codecademy and they have free lessons online, and they give licenses to our students for their pro package, but you can do a lot on the free package as well. And they have really good computer science lessons. I imagine that you've tried all the different LLMs, but it's really interesting to try them in different ways. Like open up six different LLMs and then like have one do a code, have them all do a coding problem, have them all do a math problem, have them all write creatively, have them all write for business, and see which ones actually work best for you. I think coding with Copilot is really awesome. You can do a lot more coding than if you did it without Copilot with you. And I think there's a video series on YouTube called Coding Train. They have a lot of really good initial computer science lessons and activities. Also, just make sure you're following your schools or families' policies for if you're under 18, make sure that you're not sharing information where you shouldn't. Don't share any personal information. And then finally, just make sure that you're citing, if you use AI accurately. You can look up how to cite using an LLM and just make sure that you're following whatever APA or MLA. There's guidelines for using AI and citing your sources. So just do that thoughtfully. And then make sure you take as much math as you can in school. It'll help you if you're going to get a computer science degree. There's a really great lesson on Khan Academy about matrices and vectors and all those like things that you might not get in a traditional math class. So go over there and they have some good AI lessons too.
Sounds amazing. And then, sort of just to end off, if you had to go back and sort of give your high school self one piece of advice, what would that be? And sort of like why?
Keep going. Things won't go as planned. You will have failures, and failure is an opportunity to pivot or working harder. Um, you will be okay if you just keep going. Um, Maybe I knew that back then. Maybe I would say something like, it's going to be okay. It gets easier. I wish people hadn't told me that, like, high school is the best years of your life. Like, that was so not true for me. And, like, so many good things came later, right? Like, it doesn't have to be the best time, and you don't have to have loved high school because there sure is a lot to love about being an adult.
I see. Thank you so much once again for being able to make it today and sharing your insight. It was really phenomenal, sort of having the ability to talk to you and seeing your perspective.